I was told no so many times throughout my career. And I just sought who's going to say yes? Who's going to give me this opportunity?
Hello, and welcome to Vet Life Reimagined, where we are all about the possibilities of careers and life in veterinary medicine. I have the privilege to now know our guest today, Angela Ramiro. Angela came recommended by the co-founder of High Five Vet, Susie Kim, whom I met at the Veterinary Innovation Summit. She had told me that I really needed to talk to Angela, so I did, and she was right. Angela has a very unique career journey in vet med. Today, she is the Chief Veterinary Officer at Muttville Senior Dog Rescue in the Bay Area of California. Angela's journey had a lot of frustrations, but she shows that understanding your values and what you can offer the world will get you to beautiful places. And no matter the lack of letters behind your name, you can get a seat at the table. Angela does a great job explaining her career path and her thought process throughout, so I'll hand it over to her, starting with how she knew she wanted to be part of veterinary medicine.
So my path to veterinary medicine is really not typical. I did grow up like so many other veterinary professionals, loving animals and having them a big part of my life. But I really kind of fell into this career. Was going to college for forensic science, actually. And I was working, a 19-year-old working at a local photography studio and really just hating that job so much. And my roommate at the time was pre-vet, and she was like, hey, do you want to come work at this local clinic as a receptionist? It pays 75 cents more an hour than you're making right now. And I was a poor college kid. So I said, yeah, let's do that. I could check people in and out of appointments. And so I started working for Banfield back in 2003 as a receptionist and did their vaccine clinics and was checking people in and out for appointments. And I didn't know anything about anything. So I did not know what vaccines were. I didn't know anything about flea control. I just knew I liked animals, and I saw all the great things that were happening in that clinic. So I kind of really dove in. And I worked throughout my finishing college as a receptionist. And really, it was interesting because Banfield has all of these drop-off comprehensive exams as part of their wellness plan. And I worked at a clinic in Concord, California, that was a really, really busy clinic and would have 25 to 30 comprehensive exams dropping off throughout the day, along with the regularly scheduled appointments. And as a receptionist, I was constantly hearing clients call and say, oh my God, when is my dog going to be ready? I dropped him off this morning. And so I would go in the back and be like, okay, what do we got to do to get this dog out the door? This owner is really upset. So I started like holding dogs for vaccines and helping with blood draws and helping with x-rays. And I actually got in trouble because I would leave the front desk unattended. And I was constantly being told, Angela, there's clients up front. What are you doing back here? And eventually my lead doctor said to me, hey, do you just want to start training as a vet assistant? Because you seem to be really enjoying these things back here. So I jumped at that opportunity and really started being involved in the actual care of the animals and learned all the technician skills and was doing dental cleanings and x-rays. And over the years, eventually became a lead technician at that hospital. And I remember shortly after I got that promotion, I was at the Western Vet Conference. And prior to that conference, I was still looking for a forensic science position. I just graduated with my biology degree from CSU Hayward and applying for jobs in the forensic science world. And I was at this conference and I got a call from a lab that I had applied for a job at. And they said, okay, we want to give you this position, this entry-level position at this lab. And I was really at this crossroads of, do I leave vet med or do I stay in vet med? And I remember being so conflicted at this conference, learning about all of this amazing continuing education. And I ultimately turned down the forensic science job and stayed in veterinary medicine. And kind of financially motivated. Like I was going to be starting from the bottom in this forensic science position, making like $10 an hour. And I was already kind of rising in vet med. And so I stayed in that because I was like, I'm really good at this and I don't know that I want to give it up just yet. And so I stayed as this lead technician, and it was actually my field director who had gathered all of the leads from the area on a quarterly basis. And she said to all of us, if some of you want more, please come talk to me. If you want to do more, if you want to rise in your position, talk to me. And I was the only one that actually did take her up on that offer. And she had created a regional pet nurse training position for me. And so I was now responsible for not just training my team in Concord, but training all new technicians that entered Banfield into how do we do things at Banfield, help onboarding them and getting them familiar with policies and such. And so I did that for a while, and then was for about 2 years, and was really finding it not as fulfilling. I often had a lot of suggestions on how we could make things better, how can we help other people rise within this organization, and wasn't really met with a lot of support in that way because I was just this lowly trainer. And so I left Banfield to go work at my local emergency clinic. I was not a lead at the emergency clinic, but it was this new form of medicine that I had never been a part of before. And so I started gobbling up as much emergency medicine experience and critical care experience as I could. And after several years in that, I wanted more. I was like, hey, there's some better ways that we can do this. And I was a technician and nobody was listening to those suggestions. And so I thought, okay, I need to rise to a more leadership position within this company. And I applied for a lead CCU position, and I didn't get it because they said they wanted to hire an RVT. And I didn't get my RVT because I had finished my bachelor's degree and I didn't want to go back to school to earn some letters after my name to do the same job that I was already doing and that I had proven that I was capable of doing. So I left that emergency clinic and I went to lead a team at a private little general practice. And that practice, we were doing really amazing things in that practice. Technicians had never done blood transfusions and never had done CRIs or had DKA patients in-house where they were referring everything out. And I was like, hey, we can do this here. We don't have to send this dog to emergency. We're totally capable. So our team started doing more critical care medicine in-house. And then eventually that practice sold to a corporation, and they didn't want to hear what I had to say anymore because I didn't have an RVT after my name and I didn't have an MBA after my name. And so I left and I started doing relief technician work. And this was about 10 years ago, and relief technicians didn't really exist. I remember going to each clinic and saying, hey, I can fill in if you've got maternity leaves or if you've got sick people. And they were like, what? Like, people actually do this? This is a real thing? And I said, yeah, I can do this. I've worked in several hospitals. I know how to get the job done. And so I started doing that for about 6 to 8 clinics. And I found myself working all the time. But I really wanted a home base, a place where my voice was heard and where I wasn't just filling in. And so I ultimately was looking on Craigslist one day for positions. Craigslist, which is people, it doesn't even exist anymore.
I don't know, but I remember it. So
yeah, so I found this position that was available in San Francisco at a dog rescue called Muttville Senior Dog Rescue. And I applied and they called me for an interview. And I lived out in the suburbs from San Francisco. And so I rode the BART train in. And if you've ever been in San Francisco and ridden BART, I got off at the 16th and Mission BART station, which is a experience all its own. And I remember walking up the street towards the dog rescue and thinking, oh my God, is this even a real job? Am I going to get trafficked? Like, is this real? And it was real. And they were looking for somebody to manage their veterinary program and grow their veterinary program to fulfill the needs of all the senior dogs that were coming into the shelter. And it was really startup-y. Like there was card tables with bottles of hydrogen peroxide on the table. They didn't have any lab equipment. They didn't even have a veterinarian. They had a technician that was kind of providing care as best she could. And I was a little scared because, as so many other veterinary professionals can probably attest, experience with rescue can be challenging. It's often people with really, really big heart, but not enough funds to fund real professionals in those spaces. And so I took the leap and I took the job. And it was challenging at first. Like we didn't even have prescription labels. There was people sending, I still remember this one patient and her foster coming in with a bottle of 500 Baytril tablets and asking me, when do I stop giving this medication? And I said, what? How long have you been giving this medication? What are you giving it for? And she said, I don't know. And so he said, well, I'm just going to take that bottle from you and we're going to find a veterinarian to assess this dog. So I've been at Muttville now for 8.5 years. And what's really special about this position is they did value my voice and they did value all the experience that I had before coming here. And so over these last 8 years, we've created a clinic. We now have a full-time veterinarian. We've got 4 technicians. We're providing all of our care in-house for our dogs in a timely manner. And in doing so, we've been able to rescue over 1,000 dogs a year for the last 8 years. And I started out as the veterinary program manager here. I then, after really directing that program and growing the program, I became the director of veterinary programs and had more, I wasn't so clinical anymore. I wasn't in the clinic anymore, but I was really leading teams and training more people and empowering more people to be successful as veterinary technicians and as veterinarians. And now I'm the chief veterinary officer at Muttville, where I am helping the leadership team really shape Muttville's future and really making a footprint with not just in the animal rescue world, but in veterinary medicine as a whole. One really special aspect of Muttville being senior dogs is we get a lot of dogs that come in at end of life. They've got some terminal condition, and they're often surrendered to the shelter because people don't have the funds or the capabilities of diagnosing and curing these ailments. But what's special is Muttville has a hospice adoption program and a hospice medical care program. And I had never been a part of hospice medicine before. It was really not something that was even on my radar. And in my position here, I really get to share the gift that is hospice. And so now I feel like like I said, my voice is heard. My voice, people ask my opinion about things before in ways that was never possible when I was a technician or an assistant. And so like I said, I'm not working in the hospital anymore, but I'm very much a part of the clinic on a much bigger level. So yeah, that's my journey.
So I definitely want to come back to Muttville, but I have so many questions. So going back all the way to Banfield, you said there was an individual who offered, hey, if you want more, which I heard you kind of say that phrase a couple times, but they were willing, if you want more, if you're looking for something a little bit different, maybe a way to grow yourself, just reach out. I have some ideas. And you said you were the only person to do that. I'm really curious. Do you have any idea why no one else followed up with that offer?
So it's a good question. I think some people really like working in the clinic. They really liked their position as a lead technician or a lead CSR. And so they were happy in that. I also think that a lot of them didn't feel capable. And maybe that's around a lack of certifications that people see associated with those higher roles. Like when I looked at everybody that was higher up in the organization, they had MBAs, they had RVTs, they had VTSs after their name. And a lot of people that I worked with on the clinic level don't always have those things. And so I think they just assume, oh, I'm not capable of that. I'm not able to do that. And I really jumped at the opportunity because I'm like, somebody is opening this door for me. That somebody is saying, hey, if you want this, you can reach for that. So I really just jumped at that. And I was like, if it fails and I'm not able to do that, then I can always fall back. I can always be a technician. I know how to do that job. But I think it's a little of being brave, and trying to do something that, or seeking the opportunity to do something that you've never done before. And I think that more people should be willing to just take a chance, just try. And if it doesn't work out, then you can always go back to what you know.
Yeah. One thing that I want for everyone in our profession and beyond, but I focus on veterinary medicine, is the diversity of career paths. And I think a lot of times people think one direction, right, is like a certification up, maybe more towards management. And there's so many other options. So, and you're a great example of that, you didn't get another certification. You just built upon experience and knowledge and skills, and you started to find what you liked, and you started to find kind of what you were looking for. And it sounds like you were looking for a place where your voice was heard and you can make a difference. And so you kind of followed that in your own personal growth. And now you're chief veterinary officer. So what are your thoughts around career paths for veterinary technicians?
It's interesting. I know so many veterinary technicians. It's the people in veterinary medicine, I think, is why I've stayed in veterinary medicine for 20 years. And veterinary technicians are some of the most dedicated individuals. They do, I think, the hardest job in the clinic. They are dealing with clients, they're dealing with animals, they're dealing with doctors, and they're managing all of those relationships and conversations throughout their day. And so I think it's, for veterinary technicians, it's, where do you want to go? Do you want to be the best veterinary technician that you can be? Do you want to practice some of the most complicated and intensive medicine possible? There is a place for you there. And with our veterinary technician shortage, we absolutely need individuals to stay in that role and grow within that role. But I also think it's really important for technicians to help others along the way. So if you have these little, I like to call them baby technicians, if you have baby technicians that are showing up in your clinic and they're asking for that opportunity to place that catheter, to monitor that anesthesia, to place those central lines, like, give them the opportunity. We talk about see one, do one, teach one. And I really, really strongly suggest that for everybody. Like, I remember the first time I was allowed to practice placing a central line on a dog, and I was freaking out, like, oh my God, I can't let go of the guide wire. But it was my fellow technicians that were like, no, you can do this. Like, I know you can do this, and really helped me along the way. So it's important for us to help each other out and be this really strong community among each other, and recognize if somebody's asking for something, if somebody's looking for more, like, let them have a voice, let them have a place within this field. We need them to develop themselves, and the longevity of our profession is reliant on that. I do think that veterinary technicians also, just like doctors, are leaders within the hospital. I remember working in the CCU, and you're managing 15 patients that are all super critical. And some of them are on the tree of life of fluids, and you're managing that. You're managing cases. You're communicating with doctors about what's needed. And so management is another spot that veterinary technicians, if you want more, if you want your voice to be heard, management is really the place where that happens. But it's different. It's instead of managing cases and animals, you're managing people, which can be really, it's a whole different ballgame in that way. So if you're looking to rise within management, really start looking at what what are the things that I need to be a better people person? What are the things I need to do to have better, more effective conversations with people? People ask me all the time now, as a chief veterinary officer, what is your job? What does that mean that you do? And I like to always say that my job is conversations. That's what I do all day, every day, is have conversations with people and really try to help others develop themselves into leaders, themselves into the best technician, the best CSR, the best veterinarian that they can be.
So, what has helped you most develop the more people skill side of what you do?
A lot. So I've done a lot of workshops. I've done a lot of personal development around that, but it's also the failed conversations that I've had that have really helped me develop that. I remember very early in my career, like when I first became a lead technician, the head doctor at that clinic, she was like, Angela, like people are kind of afraid of you. You are really direct and you're really can be cutting at times. And I was like, well, I'm right. But I realized also that's not effective. Even if you're right, but you're cruel, you're not going to move that needle forward. So it was this real eye-opening moment to me of, oh, you really need to train your people skills. It's just like I had to learn how to play central lines. I had to learn how to talk to people. There's actually a really, really great book that was recommended to me several years ago, and I still talk about it to this day and recommend it to people to this day. It's a book called Fierce Conversations. And some takeaways from that book are, one, all the conversations that you have are mostly with yourself and sometimes with other people. So like when you're having a conversation, you may say 2 words to somebody, but then they're going to go think back to those 2 words and they're having that conversation with themselves about the words that you said to them. So be really thoughtful in what you say to people because it's going to last longer than just the time that you're talking to them. And then the second takeaway from it is all of our relationships are the sum of the conversations that we have and don't have with people. So if you're not having a conversation because maybe you're afraid of what that person's reaction will be, you're really missing an opportunity to develop that relationship with somebody. And if you can approach that conversation fiercely and empathetically, then you're really going to push that relationship forward. So I really think about that all the time when I'm having conversations with people, because people are what this field is made of. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I want to approach that conversation empathetically. I want to give them an opportunity to say their side of it. And then hopefully, because you approach it with honesty and with empathy, you can really come to this common ground and push the needle forward. You don't have to bully your way to the top, but you do have to really open up and be a little vulnerable and seek to understand.
I like both sides of that. Our relationships are the sum of the conversations that we have and don't have. So the importance of communication and kind communication. So just in case someone is thinking, this sounds fantastic, but as you mentioned, we have a shortage and we're busy. How do we have time to teach people who want to learn these skills, whether it's technical skills, but also people skills? What are your thoughts to that?
Oh, that's interesting. It's it's all about prioritization, I think, are you going to prioritize the relationships with your coworkers and with your managers and with people that are in your life? And I'm one of these people that everything is on my calendar. So if I know that if I want to do something, if I need to do something, I put it on my calendar. When I'm talking to people that are interested in management, I say, like, your management, as a manager or as a leader, you need to run towards the fire. That's what your opportunity, that's what your job is. So like if you're feeling something's feeling sticky, you have to prioritize running towards that and understanding what that stickiness is. Where is the breakdown in this? So I like to think back to when I was working emergency and we had we had this really, really sick DKA patient, and it had a central line placed, and it was not placed well. It was clogging all the time, and the bandage was wrapped all weird, and there was urine soaking into it. And I was like, oh my God, let's unwrap this and try to problem solve it. And I saw it was sutured to hair. The place wasn't it wasn't placed properly. And I remember thinking, okay, I know who placed this. And I know that if I go to her, she might be defensive in me saying, hey, I noticed this wasn't right. So I really thought to myself ahead of time, like, do I just not say anything? Do I just replace this catheter, or do I take this opportunity to have this uncomfortable conversation with this person and help her be better, but also advocate for this patient and do so in an empathetic way? And so I did. And there's actually this one tool that somebody gave me it's called Carefrontational feedback. So it's a way to provide that feedback in a loving way and provide the opportunity for that fierce conversation to occur and not have such a defensive response. And so I followed that format, one of which is to first ask if you can give feedback, if they're in a place to receive feedback, and get that permission to give that. And I did. And I just explained, hey, I noticed this happened. What can you tell me about that? Give them the opportunity to seek to understand before you seek to be understood. So we talked about it, and it was actually, she was like, oh, I was really in this rush and the clippers died, and that's why I sutured it in this space. And I didn't know that this happened. And she appreciated my honesty and empathy also in the situation. And so we moved that needle forward in that. And then the next time we had to place a central line, that technician, I remember she was like, oh, I'm going to make sure I shave that appropriately. And her central line was successful after that. I know sometimes we feel like conversation is confrontational, and sometimes it doesn't have to be confrontational. It's just a conversation, even if it's around something that you're worried about how this other person will react.
Yeah. A lot of times it's the how we deliver the conversation can make a huge difference. Yes, absolutely. And also going back to, you started to describe a little bit about why you didn't go for an RVT. And one of the things that you shared with me in our pre-call was also looking at it. Yes, you would really be going to school financially, you would pay for school and then come back to do pretty much the same job with maybe 50 cents more or something like that. So there wasn't really this huge incentive. So what are your thoughts about people who might be considering going for additional schooling, and maybe, what should we consider when it comes to supporting veterinary technicians who want to do more education or want to grow in their career?
Yeah. So like you described, I didn't want to go back to get my RVT. When I was going to college, I wasn't going for veterinary medicine. I was a biology major. So a lot of the classes that I was taking were the same classes they were teaching at the technician school. And so I was like, do I really want to go back to school to take microbiology again when I've already taken that? Do I really want to dedicate myself to this 18-month program to, like you said, to do the same job that I'm already doing? It was such a small pay increase. It was $2 an hour more. And so I was like, is it worth me going back to school and spending $80,000 at this program to earn $4,000 more a year? And so, and at the same time, the education is important. We want veterinary technicians that are in a place that understand what they're doing, that understand why they're turning that ISO up, that understand what's happening to the biological systems when I do so. So I think around education, it's important. It absolutely has its place. And how can we make that education accessible to more people so that they can step into that role? For me, I was recognizing early that my place, while I was good at the technician stuff, it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I really wanted to lean more into leadership and management. And so it didn't really make sense for me to obtain these letters that would establish me as a veterinary technician. But an RVT doesn't mean that you're a good leader. An RVT means that you've gone through this program and taken a test and shown that you have a knowledge base around this specific area. But that wasn't my secret sauce, that special place, that wasn't where I really saw myself going. So I didn't do that. I even considered going for my CVPM, Certified Veterinary Practice Manager. I really considered doing that. I was leading a hospital, but I didn't have those letters. And I was like, oh my God, am I really capable of running this hospital? I don't have anything that says that I can do that other than I really want to do it. And I've kind of built something here at Muttville along those lines. And so I actually, during COVID, did all of the CVPM online schooling, because we're all sitting at home staring at our computers. And I was like, I know this stuff. Like, I know these things. I've done it in my day-to-day job. So I didn't take the test. I was like, I don't want to take this test and gain these letters after my name to do the same job that I'm already doing. And my job wasn't going to give me extra money because I had these 4 letters after my name. They're like, you're already doing it, Angela. But like, okay. So I think there's a lot to be said for, yes, earning letters after your name really shows that you've completed a program, that you've learned what this program and demonstrated by taking this test at what this program seeks for you to understand. But I don't think people understand that doing it, on the job experience, really seeing the workings and having the opportunity to be a part of the business without going through a formal education around it, especially around leadership, not like for veterinarians and such, but you can do the job. I don't need letters after my name to tell me that I know how to run a hospital.
And I think that's a good context that you had already done a bachelor's program. So you had done a lot of the education, as you said, that would have been a repeat in a RVT type of program. So maybe for those who haven't done 4 years, maybe that is right. But I think one of the take homes here is no, it sounds like experience helps you also understand, what are you interested in? What do you like? And then you can start looking at what is the best next step for me and getting to where I want to go. For you, you liked the leadership, you liked that direction. So that's the direction you went instead of the RVT route, which makes sense for you. So anything else there before I ask you some questions around Muttville?
So it's real interesting. People ask me, like, how did you get to this role? Like, I don't know any other person that is a chief veterinary officer that is not a veterinarian. I am the only one that I know of that. And I do get a little imposter syndrome about it. Like, oh my God, what am I really qualified to do this? And some people will say no, and that's okay. But what I recognize is I already have a seat at the table. Like, if you have a seat at the table, then somebody thought that you were worthy of being in this place. When I'm looking at more junior colleagues, I'm like, if you want something, just try to go for it. Like, the worst that's going to happen is you're not going to get it, and you're going to be still in the place that you know and that you're comfortable with. But don't always feel like a no is the end of the line. I was told no so many times throughout my career, and I just sought who's going to say yes, who's going to give me this opportunity. We are a very female heavy field, and I think women especially, like, if you look at a job description, and women will look at all the requirements and they'll be like, oh, I don't have every single one of those requirements, so I must not be qualified. Well, men don't do that. Men are like, oh, I could figure it out. And so I often say to myself, to other women, especially that are experiencing this, I'm like, what would Chad do? Chad just being the like general man. But like, I'm like, what would Chad do? Chad would just go in there and say, yeah, I can do that, or I've done that. And just try, just reach for it. Because what if somebody says yes and you're given an opportunity that you never thought was possible before?
I love that seat at the table. And I think more and more we need veterinary technicians and just different people at the table. We need that diversity and different perspectives. So when you say you have a seat at the table, what is most important to you in your personal goals and making an impact in our industry as a whole? Like what do you hope to help advance, change, etc.?
Um, yeah, I want more people at the table, you know. It doesn't have to be a little kitchen nook table, you know. The table can be huge. And I, like you said, we need more diversity of thought. We need more people with different experiences commenting on it. You know, just because you don't have some letters after your name doesn't mean that your opinion isn't valuable. So I really encourage people, and in my career, I'm constantly asking people what they think. What do you think? What do you want to do? I may have an opinion about it, but I want to hear what you have to say about this situation and offer them a seat. That's what I want to do. Offer more people a seat.
I love that. And so right now you're at Muttville, which is a senior adoption shelter. It is really interesting. So I was searching it and it's really impressive. It sounds like there's kind of a unique story. So it was a lady who started it back in 2007. And so is there anything that you'd like to kind of share about some of the unique aspects of the story behind Muttville, or anything that might be maybe people don't always know about when you talk about shelter medicine or shelter environments? You mentioned that sometimes it's really hard because people have good hearts and no no money in the pocket. So it may be hard from a business point of view, but maybe some other misconceptions, anything that you'd like to share around that.
So Muttville is such a special place. I was really hesitant to sign up to work with the dog rescue. In working in emergency and critical care medicine, we would get patients in from other dog rescues, and we'd have like, I still remember we had one rescue that came in with 5 parvo puppies, and they were like, we have $500, like we need to fix these dogs. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen with $500. And they were like, kind of like antagonizing towards the clinic because like they had limited funds, and these dogs need intensive care. And so I was really, when I came to Muttville, I was, like I said, I was walking up the street in San Francisco Mission District and really like, oh my God, what am I doing? And they were different. They were an organization of people that really wanted to do good. They were asking for professional opinions. They were seeking to add more people to the table to help solve this challenge of caring for senior dogs. Muttville was founded by Sherry Franklin in 2007, and Sherry is a hairdresser that just loved dogs and worked as a volunteer at her local shelter. And what she recognized was that all the senior dogs weren't even put up for adoption. They were just stuck in the back in their runs until it was time to euthanize them. So what she started doing was she was just started taking them home one by one and finding them homes and taking them to her local vet to like fix them up a little bit, and then finding them homes. And in that first year, she rescued 27 dogs. And I mean, she's a hairdresser, so she's great at talking to people, and she knew a lot of people, and people would come in to get their hair done, and she'd put an old dog in their lap and be like, you want to take it home? And they did. So over these last several years, we've just been increasing dogs. You know, the first year was 27 dogs, then it was 150 dogs, and it grew from there. And I started at Muttville in 2015, and I think they had at that point rescued just a little over 1,000 dogs, like 1,500 dogs. And I was like, okay, they are asking me what do we need to do to save more dogs? And I said, and we were outsourcing veterinary care to all of our local hospitals. And what I knew from my previous experience is that if you're outsourcing, you're going to be paying at a premium for that care, because hospitals can only discount so much. I understood veterinary not economics enough to know that if they're giving me any kind of discount, then they're losing money on this case. So I was like, the hospital's motivation isn't going to be to provide you free veterinary care. They can't do that. And they deserve to get paid for what they're doing, and they need to get paid for what they're doing. So I was like, the way that we're going to save more dogs is if we build a hospital and start providing that care ourselves. And that's a big investment. I remember, I think it was at the end of my first year, I was like, hey, we got to build a hospital. We can't keep pushing these dogs to other places. We're waiting weeks on end for an appointment just to spay a dog. And so I was like, can I have some money to hire a veterinarian and hire a technician? And so it was kind of this leap of faith. They were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try it. And we hired a veterinarian. And we started doing our intake exams with a veterinarian in-house. We got a IDEXX lab contract and started doing lab work in-house. We started being able to diagnose terminal medical conditions in these dogs. Like, I still remember somebody donated a really awesome ultrasound to us. And we had this dog come in, a golden retriever that was having some shortness of breath. And our veterinarian and I looked at each other and we were like, I think this dog has a pericardial effusion because it's a golden retriever. And thankfully we had that ultrasound machine, diagnosed it. We saw it on there and we knew how to tap that. Like we had that training. And so I remember we tapped that pericardium on that dog. What kind of dog rescue does that? Who does that in a dog rescue? And then Muttville had this hospice adoption program. So we hospice adopted that dog out, and that dog lived another 3 months in a hospice home. The person that adopted that dog was educated about pericardial effusion, what that means, and was told, hey, this dog's going to die. But what this dog needs right now is some focused symptom and pain relief and a soft place to land and a plan for euthanasia when the time came. And so when that time came, that person was prepared. They were like, oh, yep, we drew some lines in the sand around quality of life for this dog. They were prepared for that euthanasia. We euthanized that dog in Dolores Park with the sunset. And that adopter, I remember saying, she was like, this was one of the most life-changing experiences for me, to be so influential at this dog's end of life. And I would 100% do it again. After we euthanized that dog, she adopted another hospice dog the next week. And so for me, it was such a shift in the way I looked at veterinary medicine. Is I don't have to diagnose this dog to cure it in order to have a good outcome. And that's what veterinarians are taught in school, is to how to diagnose so that you cure with a goal of longevity. And working in a dog rescue, we don't have those resources to diagnose to cure every single patient that comes through our doors. How can we save these animals without diagnosing to cure them? So working at Muttville, we found a way to make it work. And I think we're finding a way to make veterinary care accessible to more people that are not able to diagnose to cure. They still deserve to have their animal, and their animal still deserves love and support and veterinary care. But what is that veterinary care that we can provide if we don't have funds for a CT scan, if we don't have funds for surgery, if we don't have funds for some emergency something? How do we support that animal and that guardian?
Now, I am very curious. You said, of course, you don't have the funds to have every single fancy, shiny equipment, yet it still sounds like you were able to get funds. So, I mean, you started with the hairdresser. To my knowledge, they're not the top earners in society. So, unless she was an heiress that I don't know, what is some of the business skills that you have learned and seen in this company that you feel is one of the big things with your success, to be able to open an in-clinic or in-shelter clinic and all the other things that you do?
I remember walking through the doors of Muttville and seeing really dedicated people and seeing people that love animals. And we would get a dog. Like I said, that story about that golden retriever with the pericardial effusion, it's such an amazing story. It's something that we only see. We were the only ones to have witnessed all of that, but like really understanding the power of storytelling. So we tell every single amazing story that happens in Muttville, whether that ends in euthanasia or whether that ends in somebody who has adopted a senior dog and they have it for 10 more years. We share those stories. We have an incredible development fundraising team that shares those stories with donors. Muttville's a private nonprofit, so all of our funds come from donations. And so we share everything with everybody that happens here. It's about telling those stories so that people are excited about what you're doing. We talk about how we, like, one thing that is really, really life-changing in these dogs' lives is being able to provide a dental surgery for them. Most people can't provide a dental for their dog. It's expensive, and like there's not as many people that can do them as there are veterinary professionals out there. So we seek to provide a dental for as many of our dogs as possible. And so when you tell that to somebody, when you show that, you take photos of that dog's mouth, and we call it Muttville mouth. And every tooth is rotten and you can smell that mouth across the room. And then we do a dental on that dog. And the next week that dog has reversed aged because of that care that you provided them. We show that to everybody that wants to see it, and people are willing to give towards that. So we get a lot of our funding from major donors, from ongoing giving programs. Like we have a Mutt Guardian program where if you adopt a dog from Muttville, or if you just go to our website, you can sign up for a Mutt Guardian program and provide an ongoing donation towards our services, towards the services that we provide. And we also have an incredible marketing team that puts out all of these stories, all of these photos on every platform. So we have an incredible team that knows how to talk to the news. How do you get on the news? How do you make an Instagram post that goes viral? How do you get in the local paper? How can we get in on an interview with anybody that's willing to share our stories? It's all about telling your stories and really getting what you're doing out there.
Well, that sounds like a whole nother episode. So what cool things to understand when it comes to, it's a human animal bond, right? And it's protecting that bond and being able to tell the story. We're about to run out of time. So any last thing before I might rapid fire just a last few questions for you?
I just really appreciate this opportunity. It's when you reached out and were like, "Hey, Angela, I want to interview you." I was having those flashes of imposter syndrome, like really, like what? Really? Who? I never thought I would be on a podcast before, but somebody told me this, and I want to share this with everybody who's feeling like they're not capable of something, is that real imposters don't get imposter syndrome. They're just not aware of that. So like if you're having that, "Oh, I don't know that I'm capable of this," or like, "Yeah, this person invited me to go to this, have this conversation with this person around this role that I don't know that I'm qualified for." They're offering you a seat at the table. So you're not an imposter because somebody believes that you belong there. So run with it and go for it.
Completely agree. Well, before I let you go, I love a couple final questions just to get to know you a little bit more, maybe a little outside of the veterinary world. So, do you have like a hidden skill or interest? Maybe one that people don't know so much about?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So one thing that like I said, I spend so much of my day having conversations with people as my whole job, but I'm actually really introverted. I am somebody that needs alone time to recharge. And so one hobby that I've taken up over several years ago that really does that for me is I am really into mushrooms, and like hiking through my local forest and like finding mushrooms and identifying them and understanding them. I don't like to eat them. I think they taste gross. But it's like nature treasure hunt to go hiking into the woods, and then you suddenly find this mushroom you've never found before, and I'm taking a million photos of it. So if you've ever looked at my Instagram, it's like mushrooms and dogs. That's who I am.
That's really cool. And it gets you out in nature. It's very, very, very nice. Do you have anything on your bucket list that you would like to do?
Oh yeah, I I really love to travel. I find that going to somewhere that I've never been before and having like a real culture shock is so invigorating to me. And so my husband and I have created this travel bucket list where we want to travel to all the countries that made up former Yugoslavia. And I know that's so strange, but it's one of those, a lot of people don't travel to those countries, and I don't want to go to France and have to wait in line for the Louvre for 3 hours, like with a whole group of tourists. So I'm like, where can we travel where there's not a lot of people, and it's not over toured, and so that's our bucket list. We're starting on it this year.
That's really cool. Very cool. And lastly, what is something that you are most grateful for?
I am most grateful just for the opportunities that I've been given in this life. I never thought that my life would be where it is right now. Like I said, I thought I was going to be a forensic scientist sitting in a lab looking at DNA samples, and now I have conversations with people about dying dogs. Like that's where my life took me. But I am really happy with all the opportunities that were presented to me, and like the freedom to take risks. I think a lot of people really are afraid to jump when you're not sure of what that outcome could be. But I appreciate just the opportunity to be brave and like make mistakes and figure things out. And it's really helped me create this life that I am just so excited to keep living.